My wife posted, finally free from the anchor, while I lay in a hospital bed with a shattered leg from a factory accident. Her arm wrapped around Marcus at some rooftop bar. 7 years of marriage, and she couldn't visit me more than once. But she made one fatal mistake. My name was on everything that mattered. What happened next? I turned my hospital bed into a war room. Before I tell you everything, hit subscribe and drop a comment. Where are you watching from? Because when she tried to take half of my $1 million settlement, I made sure she'd regret ever underestimating me. The courtroom showdown that followed. The morphine drip wasn't strong enough to dull what I saw on my phone screen. My wife Sarah's Instagram post showed her at some rooftop bar in downtown Phoenix, martini in one hand, her arm draped around Marcus, her so-called business partner. The caption made my blood run cold even through the pain medication. Finally unshackled from the anchor who held me back. New beginnings with someone who understands ambition. We'd been married for 7 years. 7 years of building what I thought was our life together. The factory accident that shattered my femur, fractured 4 ribs, and left me with a severe concussion happened 3 days ago. She'd visited exactly once, for maybe 15 minutes, complaining the whole time about how hospitals made her nauseous. My sister Jessica was the one sleeping in that torture device they call a visitor's chair. She was the one helping me to the bathroom at 2 a.m. when the nurses were busy. She was the one who smuggled in actual food because hospital chicken tastes like regret and broken dreams. I stared at that post for what felt like hours but was probably just minutes. The comment section was filled with people I thought were our friends. You go girl, living your best life, he was always too controlling anyway. Controlling? I worked 60-hour weeks at the manufacturing plant while she built her luxury real estate business. I encouraged every certification, every networking event, every late night at the office. If you've ever trusted someone completely only to discover they've been rewriting your entire relationship behind your back, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, and have you ever been blindsided by someone you thought you knew? Because what happened next turned my hospital bed into a war room, and sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming the person they never thought you could be. What I realized lying there with metal pins in my leg was that Sarah had made one critical mistake. She'd forgotten whose name was on everything that mattered. Jessica noticed my expression change before I said anything. She'd been scrolling through her own phone, probably seeing the same post, trying to figure out how to break it to me. You saw it, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. I nodded, then immediately regretted the movement as pain shot through my skull. The concussion made everything feel like I was underwater, sounds muffled, lights too bright, thoughts moving through mud. How long do you think this has been going on? I asked. Jessica's jaw tightened. She had that look she gets when she's debating whether to tell me something that'll hurt. I saw them together at that restaurant downtown about 2 months ago. The Italian place. They were holding hands across the table. 2 months. While I was picking up extra overtime shifts to help fund her expansion into the Scottsdale market, she was building a completely different kind of partnership. The betrayal hit different than the physical pain. That was sharp and immediate. This was deep and spreading, like poison working through my system. My phone started vibrating. Text messages from Sarah. We need to talk. Don't overreact. You're making this about you again. I deserve happiness too. That last one almost made me laugh, but laughing hurt too much with the broken ribs. I deserved happiness too, apparently, was code for, I've been cheating on you and now I'm going to gaslight you about it. Jessica grabbed my phone before I could respond. Don't, she said firmly. Not yet. Not until you have a plan. She was right. Sarah was a strategic thinker, always 3 moves ahead in every negotiation. That's what made her good at selling $1 million properties to tech executives and retirees looking for their Arizona dream. But she'd taught me everything she knew about strategy over the years, probably never imagining I'd use it against her. What she didn't know was that while she was planning her grand exit, I'd been making my own preparations. Not because I suspected anything, just because I wasn't stupid about protecting myself financially. Every document, every account, every asset, I had copies and records of everything. The nurse came in to check my vitals, interrupting my spiral into rage and planning. Her name was Patricia, and she'd been nothing but kind since they brought me in from surgery. How's the pain level? She asked, adjusting my for. Emotional or physical? I replied. She gave me a knowing look. I saw you looking at your phone. Whatever it is, it can wait until you're healed. If only it were that simple. Patricia left, and Jessica pulled her chair closer to my bed. Listen to me, she said in that big sister voice that had guided me through every major crisis of my life. Sarah thinks you're weak right now. Vulnerable. She's probably expecting you to beg, to promise to change, to do whatever it takes to keep her. Don't give her that satisfaction. She was right. Every pattern in our relationship had been me accommodating, adjusting, supporting Sarah's vision of success. When had she ever done the same for me? I thought back through 7 years of marriage, looking for moments when she'd sacrificed her goals for mine, when she'd put my needs first, when she'd been the one doing the heavy lifting. The list was painfully short. What's the first move? I asked Jessica. She smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd been waiting years to see me finally stand up for myself. First, we document everything. Screenshots of that post, all the comments, every text message she sends. Second, we call your lawyer. Third, we make sure she can't touch anything that's yours. The lawyer was a good call. My buddy from college, Derek, had gone into family law. We'd stayed close over the years, despite Sarah's complaints that he was low rent and not the kind of connection that would help her business. Derek had actually warned me about some of Sarah's behavior patterns early in our marriage, but I'd been too in love to listen. Pride comes before the fall, or in my case, before the industrial machinery malfunction that nearly killed me. I had Jessica text Derek while I closed my eyes and tried to think through the fog of painkillers and anger. The accident replayed in my mind. I'd been supervising the third shift, doing a routine check on one of the hydraulic press machines, when the safety mechanism failed. 1 second I was making notes on my clipboard, the next I was pinned under 2,000 pounds of metal. The sound of my leg breaking was something I'd never forget, like a tree branch snapping in a storm. My coworkers had to use emergency equipment to free me. The EMT said if the press had dropped 6 inches to the left, I'd be dead instead of just catastrophically injured. Sarah had been at a client dinner when it happened. She didn't answer her phone for 3 hours. When she finally called back, I was already in surgery. She'd shown up the next morning, makeup perfect, designer purse on her shoulder, and spent 14 minutes in my room before claiming she had a property showing she couldn't miss. Jessica had been there in 20 minutes, still in her pajamas, eyes red from crying. Family shows up. Everyone else has excuses. Derek called back within an hour. Jessica stepped outside to talk to him, then came back with her phone on speaker. "How you holding up, man?" Derek's voice was genuinely concerned, unlike the performative sympathy I'd heard from Sarah. "Been better," I said. "Saw Sarah's post." There was a long pause. "Yeah, I saw that too. That's actually why I was going to call you anyway. Listen, I need you to be straight with me. How are your finances set up?" I walked him through it as best I could with a concussed brain. The house was in both our names, but I'd made the down payment with money from my inheritance when my dad passed away. The cars were in my name, both of them. I had my own bank account that she didn't have access to, but we also had a joint account for household expenses. My retirement account was substantial, 7 years of maxing out contributions and company matching. She had her own business accounts that I'd never been given access to, despite supposedly being her partner in everything. "Okay, good news and bad news," Derek said. Good news is Arizona is a community property state, which means everything acquired during the marriage gets split 50-50 in a divorce. Bad news is that applies to your retirement too. But the inheritance money you used for the down payment, that's separate property. We can protect that. Divorce. The word hung in the air like smoke. 24 hours ago, I'd still been thinking about marriage counseling, about working through whatever was making Sarah so distant lately. Now I was talking to a divorce attorney while my wife celebrated her freedom on social media. "What about her business?" I asked. "You helped her build it, right? Financially supported her during the early years." Derek's tone shifted, became more energized. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the 2 years where Sarah barely made any money while establishing her client base, years where my salary covered everything. I told him about the $15,000 I'd loaned her, never repaid, for her luxury vehicle because image matters in real estate. I told him about the office space deposit I'd covered, the marketing materials I'd funded, the business coach I'd paid for. "You kept records of all this?" Derek asked. "Bank statements, text messages discussing the loans, anything in writing?" I had most of it. I'd always been meticulous about finances, a habit my dad had drilled into me. Every major expense, I kept documentation. Sarah used to make fun of me for it, called me her little accountant in a tone that wasn't quite affectionate. "We can work with this," Derek said. "But I need you to do something right now, today. Do not respond to any of her messages. Do not engage with that social media post. Let her think she's won. Let her get comfortable. People make mistakes when they think they're in control." That advice went against every instinct I had. I wanted to blast her publicly, expose Marcus for the snake he clearly was, tell everyone the truth about our marriage. But Derek was right. Strategic silence was more powerful than emotional outbursts. Sarah would interpret my silence as weakness, as devastation, as exactly what she expected. She had no idea what was coming. Jessica stayed with me that night and the next day. My boss from the factory, Raymond, visited and brought news that made the situation even more complicated. The safety mechanism failure that caused my accident wasn't random maintenance failure. It was negligence. The company had been cutting corners on inspections, and now they were facing serious liability. "You're going to want to lawyer up for this too," Raymond said quietly. "Not against you, man. But the company's insurance is going to try to minimize this. You've got a strong case for a substantial settlement." A settlement. On top of everything else, I was potentially looking at serious money from the accident. Money that Sarah would have zero claim to if we were divorced before it came through. The universe had a twisted sense of timing. Derek confirmed it later. Arizona law was clear. Any settlement I received for personal injury was separate property, not community property. If the divorce was finalized before the settlement, Sarah couldn't touch it. The next few days in the hospital became a masterclass in strategic planning. Jessica brought her laptop, and we started building the case. Screenshots of every social media post Sarah and Marcus had made. Statements from friends who'd seen them together before the accident. Bank records showing the financial imbalance in our marriage. A spreadsheet detailing every dollar I'd contributed to her business. Documentation of the inheritance money used for the house down payment. Every piece of evidence was organized, dated, cataloged. Sarah sent more texts. They evolved from defensive to angry to manipulative. "You're being childish by ignoring me. We need to talk like adults. I never meant for you to find out this way. Marcus and I are just friends. You're reading too much into one post." That last one was insulting. She really thought I was stupid enough to believe that caption was about friendship. Or maybe she just thought I was weak enough to accept any explanation she offered. On my 5th day in the hospital, Sarah finally showed up again. She walked in like she owned the place, wearing the Gucci dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year, heels clicking on the linoleum floor. She looked perfect, as always. Not a hair out of place, makeup flawless, the image of success and sophistication. She pulled a chair up to my bed but didn't sit down, just stood there with her arms crossed. "We need to discuss our situation," she said. "No, how are you feeling? No, I'm sorry about the post, just straight to business." I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. When had she become someone I didn't recognize? Or had she always been this person, and I'd just been too blinded by love to see it? "What situation is that?" I asked calmly. The painkillers helped keep my voice steady. She sighed, like I was being deliberately difficult. "Don't play dumb. You saw the post. You know about Marcus. I think it's time we acknowledge that our marriage hasn't been working for a while." The audacity was breathtaking. She was really going to frame this like a mutual realization, like we'd both been unhappy, like she hadn't been cheating and planning her exit while I was working myself to exhaustion to support her dreams. "How long?" I asked. She had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "Does it matter?" "Yeah, Sarah. It matters." She examined her manicure, those expensive gel nails I'd paid for at the salon she loved. 6 months. Maybe 7. It started at the real estate conference in Sedona. 7 months. The Sedona conference where I'd encouraged her to go, where I'd paid the registration fee because her business account was tight that month. She'd come back energized, talking about new strategies and connections. Turns out one of those connections had been Marcus, another luxury real estate agent, divorced, no kids. Driving a Tesla and living in one of those modern mansions in Paradise Valley. Everything I wasn't, in other words. "I want a divorce," she said simply. "I've already consulted with an attorney. We can do this amicably, split everything 50-50, move on with our lives." The fact that she'd already talked to a lawyer while I was lying in a hospital bed was almost impressive in its coldness. Almost. "No," I said. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. "No? Not 50-50. That's not happening." She laughed, actually laughed. "You don't get to decide that. Arizona is a community property state. I'm entitled to half of everything, including your precious retirement account." I smiled, and something in my expression made her laugh fade. "See, that's where you made your mistake, Sarah. You got comfortable. You thought I'd just roll over and accept whatever you decided. But I've been doing my homework too." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "The loan money I gave you for your business. The inheritance money I used for the house down payment. The 2 years I supported you completely while you built your client base. I've got documentation of everything. You're not getting half. You're getting what you're legally entitled to after we subtract what you owe me." The color drained from her face. She hadn't considered this possibility. In her mind, I was the supportive husband who never questioned, never pushed back, never stood up for himself. "You're bluffing," she said, but her voice wavered. "Talk to Derek Mason. He's my attorney now. Everything goes through him." I watched her process this information. Derek was one of the best family law attorneys in Phoenix, and she knew it. This wasn't going to be the easy, quick divorce she'd envisioned. "You're really going to do this? Make this ugly?" She tried to sound disappointed, but I heard the anger underneath. "You made it ugly when you posted that picture while I was in the hospital with a broken leg and fractured ribs. I'm just making sure it's fair." She grabbed her purse, turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Marcus has been more of a partner to me in 6 months than you've been in 7 years." The intended wound hit its target, but not the way she thought. Instead of pain, I felt liberation. This woman standing in my hospital room wasn't someone I wanted to be married to anyway. "Then I'm sure he won't mind supporting your lifestyle now," I replied. "Hope his real estate business is doing better than yours was when we met." She left without another word, heels clicking angrily down the hallway. Jessica, who'd been waiting outside, slipped back in. "I recorded everything," she said, holding up her phone. "Wasn't sure if we'd need it, but better safe than sorry." We would need it. Sarah was about to discover that underestimating me was the biggest mistake of her life. The divorce papers were filed 2 days before I was discharged from the hospital. Derek moved fast. Filing first gave us a strategic advantage. Sarah's attorney, some shark named Bethany Cooper who specialized in high-net-worth divorces, responded with aggressive demands. She wanted the house, half my retirement, half the settlement from my accident which hadn't even been finalized yet, and spousal support while she transitioned her business. The settlement demand was particularly bold since the accident happened after her affair started. Derek shut that down immediately. "Arizona law is clear," he told me during one of our phone consultations. "Personal injury settlements are separate property. She has no claim to it. And given the evidence of her affair and the financial support you provided for her business, we can make a strong case against spousal support." The house was going to be the real battle. Even with my inheritance money for the down payment, 7 years of mortgage payments and improvements made it partially community property. Derek suggested we fight for me to keep it and buy out her share, or force a sale and ensure I got credit for the inheritance portion. I was discharged from the hospital after 9 days. Jessica took me to her place instead of the house I'd shared with Sarah. The thought of being in that space, surrounded by memories that were now tainted, made my skin crawl. Plus, Sarah had moved Marcus in the day after her hospital visit. My neighbors had been kind enough to text me photos. Marcus's Tesla in my driveway. His golf clubs in my garage. Him carrying boxes into my house like he owned the place. Every photo was evidence, every detail documented. Sarah was making this easier than it should have been. Physical therapy started the following week. 3 sessions a week, learning to walk properly again, rebuilding strength in my shattered leg. The therapist, a former college athlete named Monica, pushed me hard. "Pain is temporary," she'd say while making me do exercises that felt like medieval torture. "Weakness is forever if you don't fight it." The metaphor wasn't lost on me. I was fighting a lot more than just physical weakness. Every therapy session, every small improvement in mobility, felt like reclaiming pieces of myself I'd lost during my marriage. The accident settlement negotiations started moving forward. The factory's insurance company offered $200,000. Derek consulted with a personal injury attorney he trusted, who laughed at the offer. "You've got permanent hardware in your leg, months of physical therapy, lost wages, and psychological trauma. This is $1 million case, minimum." We rejected the offer and filed a lawsuit. The factory's insurance company scrambled. Suddenly they were interested in serious negotiations. Meanwhile, Sarah's attorney was still demanding half of whatever I received. Derek filed motions, submitted evidence of the affair timeline, documented everything. The judge assigned to our case was a woman in her 60s named Margaret Thornton, who'd built a reputation for not tolerating nonsense from either side. Our first court appearance was in month 3 of my recovery. I was still using a cane, which Derek said helped illustrate the extent of my injuries. Sarah showed up in another designer outfit, Marcus by her side in the gallery like some kind of support system. The audacity of bringing him to our divorce hearing was almost funny. Judge Thornton reviewed the preliminary motions and financial disclosures with sharp eyes. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, looking at Sarah over her reading glasses, "your attorney is claiming entitlement to half of a personal injury settlement that hasn't been finalized, related to an accident that occurred after your admitted affair began?" Sarah's attorney jumped in. "Your Honor, they were still legally married when the accident occurred. Community property laws are clear." "So is adultery, counselor," Judge Thornton replied dryly. I'm not inclined to reward a spouse who was actively ending the marriage while her husband was being hospitalized. We'll revisit this issue when there's an actual settlement to discuss. For now, focus on the assets that are clearly marital property. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was something. Sarah looked furious as we left the courtroom. Marcus tried to comfort her with a hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged it off. Trouble in paradise already? The thought made me smile for the first time in weeks. Physical therapy continued. For months in, I was walking without a cane, though I still had a pronounced limp that Monica assured me would improve with time and continued work. The factory settlement jumped to $850,000 after our attorney presented medical evidence showing I'd likely never regain full mobility in my left leg. Career-ending injury, inability to return to manufacturing supervision, permanent disability. The numbers were real, documented by multiple doctors. Derek kept it completely separate from the divorce proceedings. Every penny would be mine alone. Sarah didn't know the amount. She just knew I was negotiating a settlement. Her attorney kept fishing for information, but we gave them nothing. Let them wonder. Let them imagine it might be $50,000 or might be $5 million. The uncertainty would drive Sarah crazy. She'd always needed to know every detail, control every variable. Month 5 brought an unexpected development. Marcus's ex-wife reached out to me through Facebook. Her name was Jennifer, and she had some interesting information to share. We met at a coffee shop in Tempe, neutral territory. She was attractive, mid-30s, looked tired in the way people do when they've been through hell. I saw the court filings, she said after we'd settled in with our drinks. Marcus was served with papers to testify about the timeline of his relationship with your wife. I thought you should know some things about him. I listened as Jennifer laid out a pattern of behavior that was eerily familiar. Marcus had done this before. Multiple times. He targeted successful women in real estate, started affairs while they were married, convinced them to leave their husbands, then slowly took over their businesses and finances. His ex-wife before Jennifer had lost her real estate company to him in their divorce. Jennifer had barely escaped with her retirement account intact. He's a parasite, she said bluntly. He finds women who are successful, makes them feel special and understood, then positions himself as a business partner before systematically taking control. I asked if she'd be willing to testify to this pattern if needed. She agreed immediately. I'd love to watch him finally face consequences. This information changed everything. I had Derek's investigator look into Marcus more deeply. What we found was stunning. 3 ex-wives, all in real estate, all left with significantly less than they'd started with. 2 business partners who'd had to buy him out after discovering financial irregularities. A bankruptcy from 10 years ago. Multiple complaints filed with the Arizona Department of Real Estate that had somehow never resulted in license suspension. This man wasn't just Sarah's affair partner. He was a con artist, and she'd invited him into her business and her life with open arms. Part of me wanted to warn her. The woman I'd married 7 years ago, the one I'd fallen in love with, I would have protected her from someone like Marcus. But that woman was gone, if she'd ever really existed. Sarah had made her choice. Now she'd live with the consequences. We filed motions to include evidence of Marcus's pattern of behavior, arguing it was relevant to the timeline and nature of Sarah's affair. Judge Thornton allowed it over the heated objections of Sarah's attorney. The deposition was scheduled for month 6. Sarah would be questioned under oath about the affair, the timeline, the financial arrangements of her business, everything. Derek prepared me for what to expect. She's going to try to make you look controlling, jealous, unsupportive. She'll paint a picture of an unhappy marriage where she felt trapped. Don't react. Don't engage. Just tell the truth calmly and let the evidence speak for itself. The deposition took place in a conference room at Derek's office. Sarah arrived with Bethany Cooper and Marcus, who apparently couldn't let her out of his sight. Derek started gently, establishing timeline basics. When did they meet? When did the affair start? How often did they see each other? Sarah answered carefully, trying to minimize everything. They'd only been together a few times. It wasn't serious until after the accident. She'd been planning to ask for a divorce anyway. Then Derek brought out the evidence. Credit card statements showing hotel charges during months when Sarah claimed to be at property showings. Text messages between Sarah and Marcus that Jessica had recovered from Sarah's old iPad, still linked to the cloud account. Messages that dated back 8 months, not 6. Messages that were explicit about their plans to build a real estate empire together, to push me out of the picture, to take half of everything I had and use it to fund their expansion. Did you tell your husband you wanted a divorce before beginning your affair with Mr. Marcus? Derek asked. We discussed having problems, Sarah hedged. That's not what I asked. Did you explicitly tell him you wanted a divorce before sleeping with Marcus? Her attorney objected, but Sarah answered anyway. No, but our marriage was already over. Was it over when he gave you $15,000 for your business vehicle? Derek slid a bank statement across the table. Or when he paid for your business coach last year? Or when he covered your office deposit? Her face flushed. He wanted to help my career. Did he want to help your career when he worked 60-hour weeks so you could build your client base during your first 2 years of business? More documents. Did he want to help when he paid for the Sedona conference where you met Marcus? The deposition went on for 4 hours. By the end, Sarah looked exhausted and Marcus looked worried. They should be. The evidence was overwhelming. Sarah had systematically used my financial support to build her business while planning her exit strategy with another man. The affair might not impact the division of assets much in a no-fault divorce state, but the financial documentation of my contributions to her business would. Month 7 brought the factory settlement to conclusion. $1.2 million, paid out over 3 years for tax purposes. The first payment of $400,000 hit my new bank account, the one Sarah had no access to or knowledge about. Derek filed an emergency motion to finalize the divorce before the remaining settlement payments came through. Sarah's attorney fought it, but Judge Thornton saw through the strategy. Mrs. Anderson had no problem ending this marriage when she thought she'd get half of everything, the judge noted. She doesn't get to drag out proceedings just because the financial picture has changed. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in month 8. Judge Thornton split the marital assets according to Arizona law, but with crucial modifications. The house would be sold and the proceeds split, but I received credit for my inheritance down payment plus improvements I'd solely funded. Sarah had to repay the $15,000 business loan with interest. My retirement account was split, but her portion was reduced by the amount I'd contributed to her business during the early years when she had no income. The final calculations meant Sarah walked away with about 30% of the marital assets instead of the 50% she'd demanded. She was furious. In the courthouse hallway, she confronted me one last time. "You did this out of spite," she hissed. "You wanted to punish me for being happy." I looked at her, this stranger wearing my ex-wife's face, and felt nothing but relief. "I wanted what was fair, Sarah. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. You can't betray someone for 7 months, publicly humiliate them, move your affair partner into their house, and then expect them to just hand over half of everything they've built. That's not how this works. You haven't built anything," she snapped. "You're a factory supervisor. I'm the one with the successful business. That I funded for 2 years. That I supported while you found yourself. But sure, tell yourself whatever you need to sleep at night." Marcus appeared then, putting a possessive arm around Sarah's shoulders. "She doesn't need this from you," he said. "She's moved on. Maybe you should too." I smiled at him, the same smile I'd given Sarah in the hospital. "Marcus, right? You should ask Sarah about the financial disclosure I provided to the court. Specifically the part about her business debt. I'm sure you two have talked about merging your companies, building an empire together. Has she mentioned she's about $70,000 in the red after paying back what she owed me and covering her legal fees?" I watched the information land. Marcus's arm dropped from Sarah's shoulders. "Sarah? It's temporary," she said quickly. "Once we combine operations, streamline expenses." "You told me your business was profitable," Marcus said slowly. "You showed me revenue numbers." "Revenue isn't profit, Marcus," I said helpfully. "But I'm sure she'll explain the difference. Good luck with your empire." I walked away, cane tapping against the marble floor. Behind me, I could hear them starting to argue. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I stood in the living room of my new condo in Scottsdale. Smaller than the house I'd shared with Sarah, but it was mine. Paid for entirely with my settlement money. No memories of betrayal, no ghosts of a failed marriage. Just clean, empty space ready to be filled with whatever I wanted to build next. Physical therapy had worked miracles. My limp was barely noticeable now. I'd never returned to factory supervision, but the settlement money gave me options. I was considering going back to school, maybe business management, maybe something completely different. For the first time in years, my future was mine to decide. Jessica came over for dinner that night, bringing Thai food and stories about her latest dating disasters. We'd always been close, but the past year had made us closer. She'd been my advocate, my support system, my reality check when I needed it. "Heard about Sarah and Marcus," she said while we ate pad thai on my new couch. "They split up. He's dating some other real estate agent now. Apparently Sarah wasn't profitable enough for his long-term plans." The schadenfreude was sweet, but not as sweet as I'd imagined. Mostly I just felt sorry for whoever Marcus's next victim would be. "How do you feel about it?" Jessica asked. "About Sarah losing everything she thought she'd gain?" I considered the question honestly. I feel like karma exists. But mainly I feel grateful that I'm not in that anymore. That I don't have to wonder if my partner actually loves me or just loves what I can do for them. You deserve better, Jessica said firmly. You always did. We finished dinner and watched a movie, and I realized this was happiness. Not the dramatic, consuming passion I'd mistaken for love with Sarah. Just quiet contentment, safety, peace. Building my life on my own terms with people who actually valued me. The factory accident had nearly killed me, but in a weird way, it had saved me too. It had shown me exactly who Sarah was when things got hard. And it had given me the push I needed to finally stand up for myself. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you believe that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can be the catalyst for the best changes in your life. Share this with someone who needs to remember that their worth isn't determined by how others treat them. Now I want to hear from you. What would you have done differently in my situation? Would you have fought for what was fair, or would you have just walked away? Let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal, share your story in the comments below. We're building a community here of people who refuse to stay down when life knocked them flat. I pulled on my jacket and headed out to the balcony, looking out over the city lights of Phoenix. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably still trying to rebuild what she'd destroyed. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had my own rebuilding to do, and for the first time in years, I was actually excited about it. The scar on my leg would always remind me of the accident that changed everything. But scars are just proof that you survived something that tried to break you. And I hadn't just survived. I'd won. If this resonated with you, hit that like button. Comment your story because knowing you're not alone makes a difference. Subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself. Remember, your bank account isn't a measure of love, and anyone who makes you feel like it is doesn't deserve you. Thanks for watching.